you? Oh, I have to do the Vlad meme. Just give me a sec. Okay. There we go. Hey, Peter. How are you? Okay, start a poll. Why is Vlad not here? He's pleasuring himself. He's sleeping. He's depressed. No, that's gonna be mean. He's... Fuck. He's playing an obscure game. Obscure game, okay. Start. There we go. My favorite is still probably the one where he's sleeping, but how's everything, Peter? I wonder if it's gonna be you and me today. I think it was almost like that last time. No, that's not true, actually. We had maybe 4 to 5 viewers. Not that I don't like spending time with you, okay? I mean, the truth is I would probably be doing this with no viewers at all, so... But, you know. Sleeping is 100% so far. I don't think he is, because I think... Wait. He's actually online right now, so it would be super easy to ask him, hey Vlad, what the fuck? But I'm not gonna do that. I like to keep the suspense. Because you have to understand, okay, he didn't tell me anything. So this is not like, oh, hey, Augie, I'm not gonna be able to make the stream because whatever, I don't feel so good, I'm too bit. No, it just doesn't. It just doesn't show up. Because that's what, you know, that's what normal people do. They just don't show up. Which is fine. I'm not, you know. I'm not trying to bicker or anything. Have you seen the Bin Laden library? The videos from his computer? Apparently lots of Tom and Jerry videos. For whatever reason. I never knew he was a fan. Let me make my mic a little bit more. Maybe he just forgot. I don't think he just forgot like 3 times in a row or 2 times in a row. I think it's 3 times. I think he's just, you know, just lazy. That would be the explanation, I think. Okay, let me put my Discord mute. There we go. I had a really nice chat with Skate today on his server. I love that server. First we started talking about, you know, Kinjals. I think, yeah, Kinjal, the you know, the hypersonic missile. And then, because I think he still believes that not even one was shot down, because, you know, that's because he's highly skeptical. He's selectively skeptical. He's skeptical about some things, not skeptical about other things, but Vlad never changes. True. That's so funny because that is a quote from Fallout. Vlad never changes. War never changes. Yeah, and then we moved into, it's Cade. Then we moved into some IT things, like, and people were posting, like the usual memes, and just telling me about .NET or whatever. And then, and then I just left. But I like chatting on his server. It's interesting. I posted some screenshots, actually. Okay. Yeah, so I did some research. I think YouTube is not going to show us to pretty much anybody unless we do some actual produced videos. So I'll see if I can do that. That may mean that I'll have to do it instead of the stream. I'm not sure. But it's going to be either a video or a stream. So I don't know. The chat swallowed post. Haven't seen Milan. Okay. I posted it in our Discord. I guess it has to be public because of whatever laws and things. Oh fuck! Wait, I didn't turn on my light. I'm so unprofessional. There we go. Be able to see me better. Although I was kind of like the low light look actually, but I don't think it looks good. There we go. Okay, so I guess people will be coming or not. Who cares? I just wanted to talk a little bit about this thing that happened recently, which is the Russian AWACS equivalent. In Russian, that would be DRLO, which means basically aircrafts for long-range aerial reconnaissance. And these things are super expensive, relatively. They cost hundreds of millions of dollars, I think around 300 million a piece. More significantly, the problem with these is that they don't actually make them anymore. So these were built in the Soviet Union during the Soviet times, and then they have built, well, they've upgraded some, but in total, I think they have maybe 3 or 4 functional aircraft. Now, Ukraine, I think, reported that they should have more, which, okay. But we also have to remember that these are super important for the Air Force because these are used for aerial reconnaissance against NATO as well, obviously, not just Ukraine. So the problem of we can spend all of our weapons in Ukraine is kind of beginning to get real in this case. I don't know if this is as big of a deal as the Moskva sinking for the Black Sea Fleet, but it's kind of similar, to be honest. It really is. It's a really big deal. It's not a big deal for it. I mean, it would be a big deal for any country, but it's definitely a big deal for a country that's not making these aircraft anymore. More importantly, more impact, I think, is caused by just losing the crew. Should be around 8 to 11, I think, people on board. All of them officers, none of them recruits, all of them professional military officers, all of them trained for years to operate on this aircraft. So let's go a little bit back just to understand kind of what happened. there was there were some attacks, ground attacks by the Ukrainians using the Ukrainian Air Force, so those old outdated bombers, ground bombers, on some of the radar installations in Crimea. And those, I think, were successful, and those installations were destroyed. After that, the A-50 with an IL-22, I think, which is another very large plane. You may remember Il-22 from the Prigozhin coup, when it was destroyed by Prigozhin using a Pantsir, I think, missile system. Also a very big deal. It's a kind of a command center. I think in this scenario it was working as a retranslator, as a repeater for the communications from and to the A-50. So they were working in tandem, basically. And of course, these are, or should be, escorted by actual fighters. So these could be Su-35s, Su-27s, you know, something like that. And basically they're there for protection purposes. This aircraft can see with its radar for at least, I think, 400 kilometers, can track hundreds of targets independently. And the way this whole thing works is it shares the data with the fighters, not just around itself, but also with the fighters that are operating above the actual theater of war, meaning Ukraine, meaning that this aircraft can see Ukrainian targets even when they're flying extremely low. Because, as you know, for the anti-air to be able to see a target, it's basically a cone of sorts, because the Earth is curved, because of the curvature of the Earth. So the radar can't really see beyond the horizon. But this aircraft is flying high, so this aircraft can see much more than those ground-based radars that you have on the ground. So again, very, very important. This was one of the key components of shooting down the Ukrainian fighter jets, those older aircraft, because basically with A-50, they wouldn't even know what hit them. There would be a Su-35 flying in a safe space somewhere, and then that Su-35 would get information from the A-50, and then the Su-35 would launch a missile, guiding the missile using the data from A-50, and so that would be a very likely kill by the Russians. So very important for them, for the Air Force in particular, but also I'm sure it was sharing information with the anti-air defenses and so on. So what has happened is they were patrolling. So these aircraft were patrolling daily. The radar that you can see on the picture here, it's called Shmel, and it's a very obviously powerful radar. Much more powerful than any kind of an RLS that you would find on a regular fighter jet. So this thing was buzzing daily. The Ukrainians knew, of course, that the aircraft is flying, and then the buzzing disappeared. The buzzing stopped, and this aircraft also disappeared from the radars. The other aircraft, the Il-22, that one apparently was able to land, and we were able to see some photos. I'll find you some. So this, for example. So what you're seeing here is a tail of the Il-22. Again, the Il-22 is a kind of an office aircraft, yeah, kind of a command center aircraft. Doesn't have any obviously weapons or anything like that. And in this scenario, I think it was working as a retranslator, as a repeater for the A-50. And you can see shrapnel here. We also have an intercept of the radio from Il-22, because this was photographed at a civilian airport. Of course, in an emergency, when you have, significant damage, you would land at the closest airport, so you wouldn't necessarily go to the military airport. So this is what they did. The problem with that is, of course, for communication, you have to use open frequencies that can be intercepted. So we do have the recording from the Il-22 basically saying that we need to make an emergency landing and prepare ambulances and firefighters. In short, nothing really more, but that's the standard message for where we have a problem. Apparently there are wounded on board. I'm not sure about deceased, but I think some members of the crew are wounded on the Il-22. A-50, presumably, like I said, the buzzing stopped, it disappeared from the radar. If this is, if it's a large plane disappearing from the radar and losing, function, the primary function of the aircraft usually means that it crashed. So, as far as we know, we didn't see any confirmation, of course, no videos or anything like that. But I think it's safe to assume that the aircraft has either, catastrophically exploded over the Azov Sea, or just fell down and crashed into the sea. So this is what we know. These are the hard facts. There are some interesting things we can see here on this photo. So first of all, we know that at least 2 aircraft were attacked. We also know that possibly a 3rd aircraft was attacked, because some Russian bloggers, some Russian Telegram channels were posting that number, saying 3, which would mean that probably one of the escorts was targeted as well, but apparently was able to escape any damage. And so that's what we know. And we also know that the A-50 didn't fly the next day and so on. So again, very likely it's destroyed. I think we can safely assume that. There are some people who are doubting that, but of course, you can doubt that, that's fine, because we don't have conclusive evidence that it was destroyed. But literally everybody on the Russian side, and of course on the Ukrainian side, seems to agree that yes, it was absolutely destroyed. Including some of the Telegram channels that have contacts and connections in the Russian military and the Russian Air Force in particular, like the fighter bomber channel, are also confirming that yes, it's not good. So the question is, how did this happen? And of course, who did this? Because we have at least 2 possibilities in terms of who did it. And the first possibility would be the Ukrainians. The second possibility would be the Russians. And both things have happened before. So I don't think any of those should be discounted, just, straight out, because both of them have happened before. Just recently, the Ukrainians did a raid with reportedly a train-mounted Patriot battery. Now, I have no idea how that worked. Was the radar on the train? Were the launchers on the train? I have no idea. I mean, obviously, we don't have photos or anything. We just have the rumors that it was a train-installed Patriot. Which is pretty great, of course. And that setup and that ambush, I guess you could call it, has destroyed 3 of the Russian 4+ generation fighters, Su-34s, so pretty much the best ground attack aircraft they have in a very short time. So we know that the Ukrainians like to do this and that they have the capability of doing this. Now, the problem, of course, is range, because the whole point of this aircraft is to stay outside of the range of your anti-air. But it's possible that it had to fly a little closer to Ukraine because of those destroyed radars that we were talking about. Because those radars were giving coverage that is now missing. So maybe it had to fly closer to, let's say, maybe 140 maybe kilometers, something like that, from Ukraine, which would technically put it in range of the Patriot's PAC-2 type missile, which again would mean that it had to be a very ballsy raid, because you would have to bring the Patriot to the front lines. And as far as we know, no Patriot battery was destroyed or even seen on the front line. So if they did this, it was done really well and stealthily. To support the Ukrainian version, I think we can also look at what Zaluzhny posted, which is congratulations to the Air Force, but you have to remember the Air Force also has anti-air. So ground-based anti-air are technically also part of the Air Force. Congratulations to the Air Force for the successfully planned and executed operation in over the Azov Sea. And then the head of the Ukrainian Air Force has also confirmed that and said something like, this is for something, I don't remember, like revenge for whatever, which is fine. So the Ukrainians did take credit. It's actually very unusual to see Zaluzhny post things like this. I don't think he did this recently. I don't know if he did it ever. Probably did, but I can't seem to remember. So if this was not, if this was a lie, it would be very strange for him to do that. Other people, absolutely. Like, you had many people in Ukraine claiming credit for absolutely anything. That's fine. I'm just saying we didn't see Zaluzhny do that, the Ukrainian commander. We didn't see Zaluzhny do that recently, at least. So I don't know. That doesn't really mean anything, but, And then they posted a GIF of the aircraft disappearing from the radar, basically. So just a radar image, aircraft's moving, blah, 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 and then one of them disappears from the radar, which presumably would be the A-50. I was actually watching the channels as this was happening, and one of the channels who is constantly reporting about Russian attacks has also reported, quote-unquote, good news. But that channel also said I'm not allowed to share details, which, okay. I don't know what that means. That channel is ran by somebody at the front lines. I'm not sure who in the anti-air, Ukrainian anti-air community, so I don't know who that is, but they generally don't tend to lie either. Appeals to authority, I don't know. And then he also reported that the Shmel radar is no longer, you can no longer hear it over the Azov Sea. So he reported that the radar went off as well. So some people are still talking about the Ukrainian version. Some people are talking about a possibility that this is hey, maybe this is a new weapon of some sort. Maybe, it could be that. But we have no evidence for that, obviously, and no announcements about that either. Patriot PAC-2 missile would be the longest range missile that the Ukrainians have. There is one more possibility, which is the S-200 missile, I'm going to show you that right now. It's a very old Soviet system. Here it is. As you can see, it's I think a 2-stage missile. Yeah, it's a 2-stage missile. S-200s were actually, many of them were left in Ukraine. Ukraine had some supply of them. And some were actually reworked into ground attack missiles. These are generally very fast, and they are designed to actually do this. To the design as a defense against high-altitude bombers. This photo actually is from Ukraine, from a museum. I'm sure this missile has been used already. So this is one possible candidate. I think the range for S-200 would be a lot, something like 600 kilometers. Range. So, okay, 160, that's A. Then we have S-200V, that's 250. And we have 300. We have 240. Then we have 300 kilometers. And I think there are modifications. I think I saw modifications that have more. Okay, 300 kilometers is the operational range. So that would definitely do it. If it would be paired with this radar, long-range radar, that would definitely do it. These large aircraft would be, I think, a good target for the S-200. So they could, in theory, have done this too, not just this, not just the Patriot Pack-2. I don't know what they would put the S-200s on and how that would work and which radar was used. That would all have to be improvised because I think Ukraine would be, using something that probably they already have from the, the Soviet days, or some of the radars that's that has more range from the Soviet equipment that's out of ammo right now. So actually between Patriot and S-200, I would still bet Patriot, but it's kind of 50-50 in terms of the capabilities, because both systems would technically be able to shoot down the A-50. There's also notable things here. You can see some square. Let's enhance this a little bit. So on this photo, you can see that the shrapnel is kind of squarish, which would be consistent with a ground-based system. And I'm saying this because there's another theory that the Ukrainians have received F-16s, and then they have used a missile such as a long range, for example, AMRAAM's extended range can do something comparable to, I think, 160 kilometers, something like that. And so, yeah, they got F-16s, and this is the first use of F-16s, air-to-air. I think that is probably the least likely version here, because remember that the F-16s are not stealthy, really. The A-50 has F-16s in its database, so it would be able to identify them immediately, and presumably to tell the escorts to destroy those F-16s, or at least to attack them. So it would be very dangerous to approach, because again, we're talking about a lot of distance, 400 kilometers of distance, where an aircraft can see you and can tell the escorts to attack you, but you have to come close to half of that distance. So it's really challenging. It's extremely challenging to do that. Was this done? I don't think so. I think this is the least probable version. First of all, because the Ukrainians didn't really get the F-16s. I mean, there are Russian rumors that they have, that they're already there, that they're flying around. I don't know if that's true. It's possible, but I can't imagine that the level of training necessary to pull off something like that was done by like a Ukrainian pilot who just learned to fly F-16. I just can't imagine that. You would need a lot of practice to pull that off and stay alive, unless it was a suicide mission. We have no indication that there was any aircraft, that it was an anti-air thing. We have no confirmation that any aircraft were destroyed from the Russian side. So, you know. I mean, it's possible. Everything is possible. You know, if you want to go wild, you could say, well, maybe they gave the Ukrainians not the AMRAAM extended range. Maybe they gave them the Meteor missile or something like that, which is very, you know, which would totally do this, maybe from even a standoff safe distance. Maybe that's possible. Okay. I mean, maybe they have, you know, the Starship Enterprise and they launch quantum torpedoes, but I mean, I think we need to remain in the realm of probable. So I think that would be, you know, the F-16 version would probably go to the bottom of my list. And of course, the other aircraft that the Ukrainians have, like Su-27s and MiG-29s and so on, I don't know if they would be even capable of launching something that's super sophisticated. So maybe some improvisation there, but you know, makes very little sense to me. Their onboard radars are extremely short range for today's standards. They're very maneuverable, but you know that wouldn't be super helpful. In other words, they would be destroyed by the escorts. So for the Ukrainian version, I mean, people are talking about drones. People are talking about, oh, maybe they put the drone in the path of a missile and then guided the missile to the aircraft, and way too complicated in my opinion. I don't know if you could even do that, but even if you could, I don't know how you would. I don't know how you would do that. So as far as the Ukrainian version goes, that's, you know, I mean, the most probable version is that they used a Patriot system in a ballsy move, moved it close to the front lines, and basically caught the aircraft in range and shot it. You can also see things supporting that theory, which is normally when the aircraft are in range and the aircraft of this size are targeted, they would be destroyed. And you know, obvious, but only one of them was destroyed. So that tells you that it was probably at the edge of the guidance systems and the missiles that were used. So whether it was an S-200, you know, outdated missile, or a Patriot system that was used at very long range, you know, maybe upgraded in some ways that can extend the range a little bit or something. I don't know, but the fact that we have seen this aircraft and that it wasn't destroyed is, you know, supports the theory that it, you know, it's very weird. That, you know, if a system was used that's able to operate in this range, I think these aircraft will be completely destroyed immediately, both of them. So, I think among the two versions, I'm guessing that version has a little bit more probability for me in terms of whether the Ukrainians or friendly fire Russians did it, but not by much. I would not discount the other side. And the other side, of course, is the Russian friendly fire side, which is a system that was protecting the Kerch Bridge was used. So this happened. Let me show you the deep state map. There we go. Okay. Here's the Kerch Bridge. Okay. And so the system was protecting it, and it misidentified A-50 and shut it down. So that could be S-400. There are some S-500s, I think, deeper within but it's mostly S-400s on the Crimean Peninsula. So basically somebody screwed up. Is this possible? Yes, absolutely. This is possible. We have seen the Russians shoot down their aircraft before. However, it would have to be an incredibly epic fuck up for this to be for this to be possible. I mean, you would have to be an incredibly incompetent operator to be able to confuse these large, very well visible aircraft that are transmitting identification friend and foe. So, automatically they appear green on your, user interface. You misidentify them for something like the Ukrainian aircraft or whatever else. So it would have to be an incredible failure of the Russian anti-air, which kind of makes it a little bit unbelievable to me. To be clear, this is the actual Russian unofficial version. So pretty much all of the, semi-official channels and the channels that are talking about the war, and some that are even affiliated with the government of Russia, but not really officially, they are saying that, yes, the Ukrainians had nothing to do with this. Is that better in terms of PR? I don't know. I don't think so, honestly. I think it's not. I think it's probably worse that it happened but it was a cell phone, because like I said, it would be extremely hard to misidentify these aircraft, giant, high-flying, extremely visible aircraft that, you as an anti-air operator, that they're doing the patrol daily. Where they are going, everything is shared. And again, your system is getting their IFF, identification friend of foe, and they should be green on your equipment. So that means that you actually have to override the system and get your commander's approval to be able to shoot on those targets, on the friendly targets. Of course, this is useful because obviously you can turn it off and so on. We saw this in Prigozhin's coup when they shot down friendly aircraft with the Russian-made Pantsir system. And of course, this is useful in situations when your pilots defect to the enemy and you want to shoot them down. So it's a useful feature to be able to turn off. But generally, it should be turned on at all times. And when you want to actually disable the friend or foe feature, normally you would need your commander's approval. I was also told that you need when you do this, or generally as you're firing on targets, when you declare the intention to fire on targets when you arm the missiles, everything gets recorded. So all of your actions are recorded and so on, and there's a log of things that you do. So, that would mean that you would think twice before shooting down a friendly aircraft. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's absolutely possible. But the Russian version, the Russian cell phone version, I think is probably even less probable than the Ukrainian version. Because if we think about it, fuck, how bad do things have to be on the Russian side to to shoot down their super highly visible giant reconnaissance aircraft? And also, let's remember one thing: when the Ukrainians did a raid, not the last one where three aircraft were shot down, but a raid on, I think, around Kharkiv, when they shot down an attacking group. I think it was a Su-34. I'm not sure if it was a Su-35, probably Su-35 as well, and some jamming helicopters as well. The Russian unofficial version was it was friendly fire. So, I don't trust those people enough to say, okay, well, it's 100% absolutely has to be friendly fire because they said so. I'm not sure about that. So, I saw some screenshots of how the user interface would look like on the S400. That was presumably used for the friendly fire. I'm not at all convinced that, that's a likely explanation. It's absolutely possible shit happens. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but like I said, the level of incompetence of that magnitude on the Russian side would honestly be surprising a little bit to me. Maybe I would be a little surprised. We have seen similar incidents happen. The Russians have shot their aircraft down. And we have also seen Iranians, in particular, after a U.S. strike, shooting down a Ukrainian aircraft from Tehran to Kiev. I think it was a full civilian aircraft that was clearly transmitting civilian IFF, but they shot it down anyway. What will the implications be with that A-50 shot down? Well, it kind of depends on if the Ukrainians did it or if the Russians did it. If the Russians did it, I don't know if there are any implications. I don't know if they're going to make any conclusions even, or if they can make any conclusions. I've read reports now that this has happened on, in the Russian Telegram channels. I saw reports from like helicopter pilots saying, oh, these things happen. I was targeted by anti-air multiple times, and they actually had to call me over radio and ask me, hey, we're about to shoot you down. Are you Russian? And then that's how they would understand that the IFF system is not working properly, which, was the cause of that. I doubt that would have happened with both of these aircraft, with both the Il-22 and A-50. So it just doesn't fit well with me. But so if it's the Russians, I don't know if there are any implications really. Other than they suck, and it's another aircraft is going to replace this one. Obviously, they do have others, so not really much, but this also weakens their defenses. Just the loss weakens their defenses globally, because they also have to defend against NATO, and every weapon that gets destroyed in Ukraine, including those Caliber missiles, those Kinzhals, that good stuff, is less weapons to use against Russia's enemies on other sides. So, this means that these aircraft won't be able to cover all of Russia, which I don't know even if they could right now, but even less now. If the Ukrainians did it, that's much more interesting. If the Ukrainians did it, then that would effectively neutralize the use of these aircraft above the Azov Sea, because if the Ukrainians have the capability, whatever it is, to shoot down these aircraft, they will do it again. Obviously, when the aircraft is replaced, they will attack it again, and presumably they would shoot down again, because they can do the same thing twice. I don't know if, if that's a raid or, moving S-200s or whatever, but they would, they would definitely try and do that again. Which we will find out soon, because I think the A-50 now has been replaced and there's another aircraft now on patrol. So if the Ukrainians did it, we can expect another incident of this happening. If the Russians did it, then, you're not going to see another incident in a while, at least. If another aircraft gets shot, that would be a disaster. That would be a really, really bad thing for the Russian Air Force, because they would lose a very large advantage that they have over the Ukrainians. And then add to that F-16s coming and potentially long-range missiles and, just the overall, better quality of F-16s when compared to most things that, well, Su-35s are okay, but we haven't seen them actually face F-16s in a long-range combat, so we're not sure how that would turn out. But one of the things that they were counting on was this. This thing basically seeing everything from the air. So if they don't have this, or if this is suppressed, not great news for the Russians. I mean, it's not great news anyway. This is not good news. I think the PR side of this for the Ukrainians is probably the best. Now, I don't know if they're faking it and claiming this shooting down for propaganda purposes, or for strengthening maybe, the Western support or whatever. I guess they're doing the right thing, because why not? I guess you need all the help you can get. Now, without the U.S. support, then it's not a big stretch to assume that, okay, maybe they want to kiss a little bit of ass of the U.S. and say, oh, we used your amazing Patriot system to shoot down the super expensive Russian aircraft, and please give us some more. We're going to do even more. The defense companies are definitely liking this. I mean, Raytheon, the manufacturer of Patriot, I'm sure is extremely excited about this. And I wouldn't be surprised if they just give a Patriot battery to Ukraine. Like, just for free. Okay, this one is on us, or something like that. Because Zelensky just made a testimonial that was really funny. That was, basically a client testimonial how great Patriot system is, which I don't know why he was talking about it, but maybe he was talking about it because it was used here. He didn't openly comment, I think, on this. Only Zaluzhny did. But yeah, if it's if the Ukrainians did this, then I think it's a really big deal, and I think it gives them a fighting chance against the Russians. It's still a very nightmarish level of difficulty for them, to be clear, because even the Su-35s on their own are very formidable fighters. People, especially the US, underestimate the Russian Air Force. Don't underestimate the Russian Air Force. Very experienced pilots, very knowledgeable people. They have completely dominated the skies, air to air, so far in Ukraine. And they would be a serious challenge to any Air Force, I think, right now. The only problem for them is they have very few planes. They have hundreds of Su-35s, which is, a lot for Ukraine, which has none. But compare that to thousands of aircraft that, NATO has or the US has. So that's the biggest problem for the Russians. If they had thousands of Su-35s, that would be an incredible force. So, yeah, I mean, I would still bet on them. But I am also sure that the Ukrainians know this, and when they do get their F-16s. They're gonna, try to keep them and not get them destroyed. So it'd probably be very stealthy, very, very low flying, very short missions, possibly used as, launch platforms for cruise missiles and things like that. Also, let's be clear, this Il-22 aircraft is out of commission. Like, this has to be repaired for quite a long time. So, yeah, you didn't lose the crew, but you've lost this aircraft effectively for a very long time. People think that, oh, well, they can just... No, they can't really just repair it. It takes a long time, months and months and months. This is probably going to take at least half a year to repair. It's not as big as, of course, creating a new aircraft, but remember that anything could be damaged here. Everything has to be checked again so that it doesn't fail during actual flight, because there could be hidden damage as well, not just the one that we see here, like, okay, just replace the tail and you're good. And these are not manufactured, I think. So, that you can say both targets have effectively been taken out. A-50 permanently, this one for a very long time. And like I said, I think the probably the worst loss for the Russians is the loss of crew for the A-50, because presumably those were the most experienced people, and they were very useful for the drone attacks, for controlling the Russian sky, and just losing them takes years and years and years of training. And I can't imagine there are many people who actually want that career, because you have to imagine that, you have to understand that these people have seen their death coming slowly, presumably. So the missile took a while to get there, and there was absolutely nothing they could do. So they saw that missile from the moment it got up to the moment it hit them, and they were tracking it on their radars, and there was absolutely nothing they could have done. So that's not a job for everyone. I would definitely not like to do that. That sounds like a horrible nightmare. I mean, I guess you're very brave if you're doing that, but yeah, definitely not a job I would select to do. I would much rather do, like bombings or whatever instead of that. So yeah, you're basically a sitting duck, and I can't imagine that many people will want to pick this career, which, it might sound insignificant, but it's really a big issue for the Russians, is to actually have really qualified people to operate this sophisticated equipment, or maybe less than sophisticated Soviet era equipment, but upgraded. This is how it looks like from the inside. I think there are... Nobody's talking about this, but... Okay, let's try like this. Okay, so let me try and find it in our... I think I posted something like this in our Discord. It's the way it looks like. Oh my god, our Discord is horrible. I definitely can't show most of these things online. Okay, so here we go. And okay. So you can see basically the crew here. This is the upgraded version, obviously. The Soviet one looks much worse. And this is the radar view for the Shmel radar. This aircraft is capable of tracking around 300 targets. And here you can see the controls, obviously Soviet era. So that's how it looks like from the inside. And I also want to show you the GIF that the Ukrainians shared. Here it is. It's sped up, obviously. And you can see the aircraft disappearing there. What does this mean? I have no idea. I really don't know. I mean, disappearing from the radar usually means crashed. Obviously, this is a Ukrainian provided GIF. This is the one that Zaluzhny posted. So it basically tells you that they can track these aircraft, but, you know, really more than that. You can see this is the aircraft that was shot down. There were also escorting aircraft, but as we said, the Il-22 that was able to come back. Hey, Coffee, how are you? It's so lonely here on YouTube. Just me and Peter. Vlad is boycotting us. Vlad is either sleeping or playing an obscure game. Okay. But there are more votes for sleeping. I think that's a safe bet. So I think my guess will be that in time we will get some more information from the Russian Ministry of Defense, because, you know, these people have families, they died. They will be absent right now, like they will be listed as missing for now, which confirms that the aircraft was lost, of course, because if they're still missing, what else could it be? But I mean, I don't think there's reasonable disagreement about the fact that the A-50 was destroyed. There's reasonable disagreement between the Ukrainians do it or the Russians. If the Russians did it, it was almost certainly a ground-based anti-air, something like S-400. If the Ukrainians did, it's also almost certainly a ground-based system. I think the air-to-air system is probably way less capable. Can't find how to tag a user to reply. I don't know if you even can you do that in YouTube? YouTube sucks. I don't know. I think I'm gonna just end up making videos here. That's gonna be, you know, no swearing, no nothing. That we get at least some recommendations, because I think the growth for the channel is gonna go down as long as we're banned. I appreciate you guys, of course, but I also appreciate finding some new viewers. But I don't think YouTube is ever gonna recommend us to anybody new. Because we're talking about the worst things that YouTube likes jokes, how-to videos, cats. You know, their CEO basically talked about this. Like, yeah, we really don't want these. Like, people who talk about politics, people who talk about war. But on the other hand, I mean, you can totally have viewers if you do those things. But I think you have to produce videos. I don't know if you can do it just by streaming. It's not the best streaming platform out there for sure. Well, we'll be coming back to Twitch, of course, eventually. Kick, I guess, is not great. Rumble seems to be a place for just the Republicans. I don't know how that's going to be as well. I guess we could try just for fun. I don't know. Maybe it's not a bad idea. But it's a specific audience. I don't know if it's going to be very interesting for Rumble. Geopolitics, in particular, I think the U.S. The U.S. Republican Party, I think, is very isolationist right now. So I don't know if geopolitics is going to be super interesting for them. All recommendations from YouTube were in politics. Yeah, but they're not streams, right? They're videos. So we might get views afterwards for the recorded streams, but I don't know how much that helps us. I guess it does. I don't know. I'll keep streaming, of course, as long as we're banned. I'm gonna keep streaming here. And I was telling Peter I may want to create some videos actually and just try that too. But what's up with you, Coffee?
Не важно.
Went off the... No. Okay, there we go. I mean, we did have +5 subscribers in the last 28 days, but I think that's not... I think that's you guys. Okay, there we go. So, going back to the A-50, I think this is probably the best we can do so far. If I would bet on all the possible versions, I would be equally split between the Russians doing it friendly fire or the Ukrainians doing it with a Patriot raid or S-200 or something like that, with more probability to Ukrainians because they've declared it. If it was friendly fire, it would be totally random. I don't know how, you know, Zaluzhny would be able to like wait and anticipate and... Watch contracts. He's weak and went to sleep. Well, men need their rest. Okay, Coffee. Look at Vlad. Vlad is getting a lot of rest. According to the polls, Vlad is sleeping right now. So. I guess let's briefly talk about the Houthis. I don't know if we ever, do you guys remember if we ever talked about the Houthis and the piracy and all? I think we didn't. It's hard for me to imagine how you can shoot down 2 of your planes. 1, yes, but 2. Well, I mean, if you're crazy, you will just treat both targets as... It's extremely hard. I talked about it, I think, before you came on. The Russians have an IFF system, identification from the foe, so it looks green on the screen. In order to turn the feature off, you have to get your commander's approval. So that's one of the reasons why I think the Ukrainian version is more likely. I mean, they did it before, okay? It did happen before, but also remember when there was that Patriot raid that took down that attacking group, those helicopters and the Su-34, I think, and the Su-35, don't remember. They also initially said it was friendly fire. It was, yeah, it's totally not the Ukrainian. So I don't believe people are using that as an argument, like the fighter bombers said it's friendly fire. They always say it's friendly fire. So I don't know if that means anything. So yeah, I'm more inclined to think it's actually the Ukrainians, and I will be very interested to see what was used, because that would kind of explain if they can do it again. And if they can do it again, this is a very big blow to the Russians, because that means the aircraft in this area are going to be suppressed, and that means that the F-16s are going to actually have a fighting chance against the Russians when the Ukrainians get them. But I wouldn't put anything beyond, some drunk operator or whatever. We saw S-400 turned over, like rolled over from the road because the driver was drunk. Like the driver's, he's driving a truck carrying hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment, and he's drunk. So, everything is possible. Don't underestimate the Russians, okay? Just briefly cover this piece of news, which happened recently, regarding the Taurus missiles.
At the moment, we don't fire much. There's a shortage of ammunition.
Ukrainians are losing their lives. Ukrainians are fighting also for our freedom.
We need ammunition. We need more manpower. We need weapons.
We have proposed to guarantee stable and substantial financing to Ukraine.
If we don't get it now, we won't move anywhere.
The United States has been by far the biggest supplier of weapons to Ukraine. Germany is the second biggest supplier, providing battle tanks and air defense systems.
Germany is now handling, by the way, 50% of all assistance Ukraine is getting. There was a recent package, pretty big numbers, like 15 Gepards, some ammo, some anti-air missiles, really substantial things. A-50s, I think, Marder and others. So,
but for Germany's opposition political party, the Christian Democrats, the country is not doing enough. Today in Germany's parliament, a motion on sending Taurus missiles to Ukraine failed. Now, the Taurus cruise missile has a longer range than other missiles available to Ukraine. It would allow Ukraine to hit targets across occupied Crimea, including the Kerch Bridge, which connects Crimea to Russia. I want to bring in now our political correspondent, Simon Young. He's here.
Wait, that video. You can see the building that's attacked here, and you can see the attack trajectory. I don't know why they cut it here. But this shows you the very sharp angle, near ballistic angle that the missile is using to attack. So it's nearly unstoppable at this stage.
I want to bring in now our political correspondent.
Leader Friedrich Merz has
dropped there for a while.
emphasized that there's a sort of stalemate on the ground in Ukraine at the moment in this war. And he says that's why he's brought forward this motion in Parliament today to sort of force the government's hand and get them to provide more. And they think that this could really make the key difference in trying to push back Russian forces in Ukraine. This Taurus weapon that's got a range of 500 kilometers and could really help to sort of take out things like munition bases and attack the supply line. So they think it could make a huge difference, and that's the reason to push the government. Of course, there's also a political motive. It's clear the government.
Yeah, I think we streamed once on Kick. I didn't get really any new viewers either. It seems to be, I don't know if, I mean, maybe we should just continue on Kick. I don't know. Nobody seems to be recommending Kick as the platform to grow. Like everybody says, if you're banned everywhere, then go to Kick. But so I don't know. We still have a hope for Twitch, I guess.
Government is somewhat split on this. Chancellor Scholz himself is hesitant to deliver Taurus, and some prominent figures within the government parties are on record as saying they think it would be a good idea. So I think it's the opposition sort of attacking that political.
So to be clear, I think this is just for show. Peter can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this vote is just to show, like, hey, okay, let's vote, but it's not actually how it's decided. I think Scholz can unilaterally make this decision.
Vulnerability as well.
And so in this case, does no really mean no? Does the fact that Parliament voted against sending these missiles, does it mean that they will not be sent?
Well, not perhaps in the long term, despite the fact that Chancellor Scholz said fairly clearly back in October of last year that he was against sending these things. The government does say that it is looking daily at everything it can do to help Ukraine win this war and not lose it.
Win this war and not lose it. Okay, that's helpful.
Concern, by the way, with Taurus is that Ukraine might use these weapons to strike at Russian territory directly, and that could lead to an escalation in the war. Kiev says it won't do that. But as I say, the government...
If you're wondering, just a geeky point here, if you're wondering what the checkmate pattern here is, it's for tracking the missile speed automatically. So they're, but for computers and sensors, it's much easier to track these patterns than the shape of the missile itself. So this is obviously a test missile.
Escalation in the war.
Normal missiles don't have these.
Kiev says it won't do that. But as I say, the government's, looking at ways to help Ukraine, and they're also making demands on other countries. They're saying, let's buy more, let's produce more weapons. There are countries out there around the world who've got...
What you saw here is the Mephisto warhead, which is an acronym for something. Multi-effect penetrator, highly sophisticated and target optimized. Okay. I love that acronym. It's basically a high penetration warhead meant for destroying highly fortified targets, as you can see on the video here. So concrete. It would be ideal for the Kerch Bridge. I don't know if you would be able to hit the Kerch Bridge. I have no idea. Like, would you actually be able to hit it? With all the jamming, with all the sophisticated anti-air around it, I honestly don't know. We would have to see and try and see, I guess.
Let's produce more weapons. There are countries out there around the world who've got stocks of some key weapons that Ukraine could use. Why not buy those up and provide those? And some are saying, well, it's not just Taurus. There are many other kinds of things that Ukraine needs.
Yeah, it's, we remember Germany would not send tanks to Ukraine until the U.S. agreed that it would do that. And now we have Chancellor Scholz saying that any delivery of Taurus...
With Taurus... No, it's also dumb. Okay, Taurus is also dumb. The tanks thing, that was incredibly dumb. Oh, but they will see the crosses on the battlefield, and they will remember that their grandfathers fought the Germans with the same signs on those tanks. I can't believe the reasoning these people have.
Missiles would depend on the United States. I mean, how do you explain this level of, caution? You first, then us.
Yeah, well, I think, of course, Germany does tie its position to the US position, particularly in sort of geostrategic military affairs.
Which, by the way, by that logic, they should stop supporting Ukraine. Then, how is that working? Germany is calling for more support for Ukraine right now, whereas, I mean, Biden is calling for more support, but Biden can't really do anything on its own. It's actually Germany that's helping way more than the US right now.
And Berlin knows that it's the economic and military might of the US that's really the backbone of the Western alliance. So keeping in step with Washington is important. I think for Germany also it's been important not to be splittable away from the pack. Putin might seize on any unique actions by Germany to say,
That's nonsense, because Biden was calling on Germany to provide those things. And Germany was saying, no, you provide them first. Like, how is it? It's just silly.
They're going further and they're becoming a party to this war, and that could escalate things in Europe independently from the US. So I think it's important for Germany to keep in step with Washington. At the same time, it's not only about that. Chancellor Scholz is pressing other European nations to provide more help to Ukraine as well.
DW Simon Young with the latest tonight here in Berlin. As always, Simon, thank you. And for more, I want to bring in military analyst Marina Miron now from King's College, London. Marina, it's good to see you. Ukraine's foreign minister says that the priority...
What is that? Is that like a... That looks like a gremlin or something. Mogwai? What's the name of it? Is it Mogwai? Those furry gremlins? Or maybe in a hull? What is that?
This year for the country is to gain control of the skies. Now, is that feasible? And would it make a difference for a city like Kharkiv, which is so close to the Russian border?
Good evening. Well, we have to deconstruct what Kuleba is saying, because Ukraine being able to control its skies is a very complicated matter. And what it means is that Ukraine at least wants air superiority, meaning being able to operate in the sky without...
I don't like this guy. I don't know why. I just don't. I'm sorry. Well, every time I hear him speak, I have this natural reaction to, okay, fuck this guy. I have the same reaction to Arestovich sometimes, most of the time, and other people. Not as much with Zelensky, actually. Especially after the start of the war. You kind of feel sorry for him, mostly.
Without any prohibitive action by the Russians. And that would entail two types of operations, defensive counter-air operations and offensive counter-air operations, meaning that the Ukrainians
Looks like Mogwai.
would need to have enough aircraft to engage the Russian aircraft, and they would have to have a network of ground-based air defense systems. So I'm not sure how it is envisaged that Ukraine is going to achieve that, knowing that the delivery of F-16s has been delayed and that there is a shortage of air defense. Of course,
I mean, even if the F-16s were delivered tomorrow, and those pilots were all Top Gun Tom Cruises, okay, Ukraine would still have a large problem. I mean, there would be no parity even, not even controlling the skies or whatever they call it. It would be a very unfair advantage for the Russians.
course, it would make a certain difference denying the Russians free operability in the airspace.
They don't have that. Like, to be clear, they still don't have that. They use limited frontline airstrikes, but I mean, all of those aircraft are hugging the ground, and Ukraine wouldn't be able to really, I think, stop them very much.
Even for bordering cities, but I don't think that Ukraine can achieve that.
Yeah, Foreign Minister Kuleba was at the World Economic Forum earlier today talking. He described 2022 as the year Ukraine defeated Russia.
It was a separate draft law. Okay. Just wanted to put our vote without coordination. Yeah, it's just political posturing. My understanding is it has nothing to do with like the real results. Germany.
On land, he said last year was the year that Ukraine defeated Russia at sea. We'd expect, you would think, an upbeat assessment from Ukraine, but doesn't the rhetoric mask a conflict that, and I'm using Zelensky's word here, that has become frozen?
Well, I think to a certain extent we have to separate the statements that politicians make from what is actually happening. And we have to bear in mind the aim of Kuleba's statement in Davos and also Zelensky's statements, because they are there to garner support from the West. It doesn't have to coincide with the reality on the battlefield. And I think right now the Ukrainian armed forces are in a great difficulty containing the ongoing Russian pushes combined with the Russian air campaign at the moment. So I don't think that the conflict is frozen. And I think it is a political statement in order to get more weapons and to show that Ukraine is still willing to fight and to push.
I mean, it depends on how you define it. I wouldn't call it frozen either, not even on the ground. But I mean, you could say, okay, there's not much that's gonna happen on the ground during 2024 probably. But yeah, I mean, you could focus on cracking the Black Sea Fleet even more, attacking Crimea. I mean, is that gonna help strategically? Yeah, somewhat, but not really. I mean, even if you neutralize the Black Sea Fleet, even if you push them away to the other side of the Black Sea, you still have the problem of Crimea being a logistics hub. So you would have to target the bridge as well, and, you know, do serious things with Crimea to actually make it matter. In terms of the other stuff happening on the front line, Krinky is still a problem. I mean, definitely not a frozen conflict. I posted those Bradley videos just recently. It seems like the Ukrainians learned to use Bradleys really well. The Bradley A-50s, and there's a video of two Bradleys, I think, and an FPV drone destroying a Russian T-90 tank. There's another video of Bradleys destroying a MTLB column. So, I mean, this is all defense, of course, but the Russians are losing a lot of armor, a lot of people, and this is all, you know, this all has to hurt a little bit at least. So if the Ukrainians dig in and defend, I think they can survive 2024, and they can push in other places, including Crimea, including the Black Sea Fleet. I think that's one of the places where you should be pushing, attacking those high-value, vulnerable targets like the aircraft, like they did, the ships, like they did, you know, high-importance buildings and things like that where important people are. That's probably the best idea you can do.
Push the Russians back.
Yeah, to get more weapons. I mean, you've been telling us, we've heard this from other military analysts now for almost 2 years, that no weapons system on its own will be a game changer. So will further deliveries of Western weapons, will they change the situation on the ground?
Well, indeed, we cannot say that a specific weapon is a game changer, and given Ukraine's needs, it needs quite a lot of different
You can. I would argue that HIMARS is definitely a game changer.
sorts of weapons, from howitzers to
I mean, FPV drones, hello.
tanks to aircraft to air defense systems, ammunition, EW, electromagnetic warfare equipment. So it's a full spectrum of what the Ukrainian armed forces would need. And I do not think that there is the capability to deliver those weapons. And whatever Ukraine is going to get, again, I don't think that it will be a major shift. Yes, it will help Ukraine with its long-range capabilities, for instance, but I don't think that it will be changing the situation dramatically unless Ukraine gets all of what I have just named.
I don't know, man. People keep saying this. There's no game changer. It's not gonna matter. I don't know, man. Like, if you hit a high-profile target, do you really think it's not going to affect the war if Ukraine is able to destroy the Kerch Bridge for at least a month, for example? Like, just imagine fucking that. Just imagine that happening. Like, Ukraine has destroyed the Kerch Bridge. Like, do you really think that's going to have no impact on the war? Do you think that's not going to provoke Putin into doing something that will escalate or get cocked? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what the reaction would be. To get more desperate. I mean, that would have to have incredible impact. Just like it's like she's trying to be this, neutral analyst or whatever, but I don't think she's accounting for the psychological impact that, I mean, imagine that for the Russians. Imagine the impact for the Russians. And that would be achieved by relatively few weapons. Like, maybe towers can do it. We don't know. Maybe not. I'm not sure. I don't know if you can target something as small as that. Maybe you can. I mean, in the environment of jamming and all of that. But I think people are estimating this. Imagine hitting I don't know, Gerasimov or Shoigu when they're in Crimea with a Taurus missile. Imagine, killing some generals and, that are really important, like commander of the Black Sea Fleet or people like that. You can do all these things with long-range missiles, and so it makes it kind of a game changer, really. Doesn't really help you militarily directly, but I mean, wars are generally not. Most of the time, they're not won militarily, strictly speaking. They're won economically, especially these, protracted wars like this. And they can be won politically as well. So, yeah. So I think this is very short-sighted. I don't think this is a good analysis. It's an okay military analysis, although I would argue they are maybe even as well, but... I think Ukraine getting a whole ton of long-range options would spell a nightmare for the Russians. I think that would be a really, really bad thing for the Russians. Because so much of this war is happening in Telegram, on TV. So much of the war is... Just remember how terrified they were from the Western tanks. Like, just, oh my God. They were terrified. Then they saw them burn, and then, okay, blah, 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 ha, ha, ha. Okay. I remember reading the Russian Telegram channels before the Ukrainian offensive started. They were terrified. They were prognosticating things like, oh my God, we're going to lose so hard. We're dead. The command is incompetent. The logistics are horrible. We're going to lose. That's where the war is waged. And then Ukraine kept them guessing where the attacks will be, and that really screwed with their brains even more. And I'm not saying that wins the war, obviously, because you still have to actually win. But it's a really... You look at Krenki right now. What's happening in Krenki? Those people are dying there, okay? The Russians are dying there. And it's pretty pointless. Not pretty, like, I would say almost completely pointless. Like, you could literally just defend around this and just leave the Ukrainians alone, and the Ukrainians wouldn't be able to achieve much because the logistics over the river are a nightmare, obviously. And so just keep it, just keep hitting it with long range things and just leave it alone. No, they stormed us daily, and they keep getting destroyed daily. Why? Because this is a symbolic thing. So yeah, that's how the wars are won, or fought at least. Nebenza discussing with his appearance, him saying that Russia's not going to attack anyone at all. At this moment, I hear explosions outside. Well, I mean, I think Lavrov during the war said that we haven't attacked anybody. So it's not just, it's their whole, I mean, their foreign ministry didn't really know there's going to be a war. So I think they were not told. I think Lavrov himself said that he didn't know. So he didn't know. The lady, what's her name? Zakharova didn't know. And I'm guessing Nebenza also didn't know. Yeah, logistics too. Yeah, stay safe, Coffee. You don't go to shelters? Wait, is there an attack right now? I guess there is, if you're saying, I mean, you know better than me. Maybe you're talking about something else. I don't think there's an attack now, is it? Happened at the same moment on the 24th. Oh, on the 24th, okay. Yeah. Well, on the 24th, I was living nearby, actually, to where you live. So. And you stayed at left, so kudos to you. Go back to the video.
Yeah, consider the debate here in Germany about sending in tourists, the tourist debate as they're calling it. Zelensky's analysis here is that the fear of sending weapons to Ukraine, the fear of provoking Russia with those weapons, enabled this war in the first place. Do you agree?
Well, I with all due respect to Mr. Zelensky, I would have to disagree, because if we look back at the origins of this war, it started well before February 22. It's been going on since 2014, overtly, with formations in the Donbass, fighting the Ukrainian armed forces. And I think during that time, it was a time when the Western countries could have potentially changed the situation and could have stepped in, but it has been largely ignored. And
I mean, she has a point, but I would go even further back. And I would say if Ukraine was part of NATO, like Latvia and Estonia were before 2014, I would argue 2014 wouldn't even happen.
Ukraine was encouraged to enact all sorts of reforms to join NATO, which aggravated Russia's behavior until what we have seen, the full-scale invasion of February 2022. Therefore, I think that the weapons, or not sending specific types of weapons, is not the real reason.
Let me just get your take on this before we run out of time. Now, with the possibility of Donald Trump becoming U.S. president yet again, we're seeing signs that countries are hedging against that and withholding weapons, which they feel that they might need to defend themselves against a further emboldened Russia. That, Ukraine may be the beginning, not the end of this. What's your take?
Well, I think the fears of Russia actually attacking a NATO country are overstated. I don't think that Russia is going to use its military force to attack the Baltics, for instance, because Russia understands that it doesn't have the capability to do so. What I think...
Yeah, I think that's a little bit far-fetched. I mean, Russia would maybe like to be able to do that, but they don't have the capability of doing that. So I think it's a little over-exaggerated. For now, things could change in a lot of years, actually. 5 years maybe. I think we could be looking at a different picture, but you would still have time to prepare, I think.
The problem is that Russia will not necessarily limit itself to Ukraine and not necessarily use
Oh, they don't allow you with the animals? That sucks.
Military means. For instance, Russia is about to sign a military cooperation pact with Iran. So Russia can influence politics in other regions of the world which are important to Western countries, including the United States. And I think that is the real danger here, as well as Russia's ongoing informational warfare.
Military analyst Marina Marone from King's College. As always, Marina, we appreciate your time and your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Meh. Like I said, I don't agree with everything she said, but if we're talking about... Oh my god, are they still making these videos? Is Ukraine losing the war to Russia? Okay. I guess we could watch that. I want to say that I think I think probably Zelensky has a better understanding of this than the West currently has, because Zelensky is there and the West isn't, first of all. And second, I think Zelensky understands Putin much better than the West does. I think the West still doesn't understand Putin really fully. And like I said, I think giving Ukraine everything it needs without this political, crap, like we see about the Taurus in Germany, I think would first show the Western resolve, and then would also enable unexpected things to happen. Like Coffee said, logistics, but also like high value targets, like just having this capability. It's not like you can predict everything and all possible ways that Ukraine could be able to use these, because these are really flexible, like the Storm Shadows, especially in the combination with F-16s. They would be able to actually, I don't know if they can be unmodified, if they can be launched from F-16s. I'm assuming they can, but they would provide just a lot of flexibility to Ukraine. And logistics did win Kherson, so I don't buy the argument, oh, well, this is not going to be a game changer, so let's not provide it. Remember, the same logic was used for F-16s in the beginning of the war. Oh, we can't possibly provide the F-16s because the Ukrainians will have to train for a year to be able to use them. Okay, well, 2 years have passed. Ukraine still doesn't have F-16s. So...
The slow, cruel conflict in Ukraine will soon head into its third year, with the pressure on Kiev to advance on the battlefield and re-energize support in the West. My guest from Berlin is Alexander Gabuyev, director of the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center.
The bad news is that, unfortunately, the support for Ukraine in the...
A Russian liberal. I hate Russian liberals. I hate Russian liberals.
Western public is going down.
For now, Russia's economy has stabilized, and Mr. Putin...
No, it did not. What are people talking about? The economy. Have you seen the eggs? Like, the eggs wasn't... Okay, people are not giving the eggs thing enough credit. Let me tell you about the eggs, okay? First of all, the official response, why are the eggs so expensive and why are there no eggs available, was, well, a lot of people got really rich something. Like, it turned out the eggs were... They're dropping it. The eggs were infected by something. And so what? Like they had to then stop everything and they had to test people and test the eggs and blah 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 blah. It's directly because of the sanctions. Like it's not a random occurrence. And Putin actually talked about the eggs. So yeah. I don't know why people keep saying the economy stabilized. Why are people saying this? I have no idea. It's like they listen to Putin's speech and Putin says, well, the economy has clearly stabilized. We're doing better than ever. We have low unemployment. I mean, you have low unemployment because everybody's at war and people are working for the defense industry and it's all financed from the government, and that's money coming from taxes and selling oil, and it's not going to other things that it should be going to. And that's not how free economies work. You don't just... Everybody who's at war right now is employed legally. So they count as employed. Okay. Anyway. I'm not saying the economy is gonna break down or whatever. Although it will eventually, I mean it's unavoidable kind of. But it may take a very long time. However, it's not good. It's not looking good. All the important indicators, even according to the Russian reporting standards, are not great. I mean, Putin selectively talks about things like, oh, the unemployment is really low. I mean, yes, but the actual growth, the actual healthy economic growth is not there. And right now they're hard hit with Chinese banks actually going with the sanctions, going with the pressure that the US is creating. So that's going to be a hard hit. I think they can work around that maybe with some other countries, but I'm not sure. I don't know. It's not easy. Like it's a very hard job to be like, to be their treasury sector or whatever. Stabilized.
Indicted on war crimes charges, is nonetheless finding plenty of friends to talk to and visit. So will his newfound confidence tempt him into a bigger war with Ukraine and even a fight with NATO? Alexander Gabuev, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you so much for having me.
A week ago, NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned the alliance to expect bad news from the war in Ukraine. He didn't say what. You've been taking a long, hard look at this war. Is Ukraine on the way to losing?
I don't think that Ukraine is on the way to losing now, but next year will definitely be crucial. And if Ukraine is not in a good position next year, that might shape the trajectory of the conflict towards loss of.
There is now a good position. Ukraine will lose territories probably. But I mean, what is I don't know how he defines a good position. I think Ukraine wins if it survives 2024.
War by Ukrainian side.
So what we're seeing at the moment is the ebb and flow that you often see with major conflicts.
The chicken already disappeared, so I know the answer to the question.
That's true, and I think that the comparison basis for this conflict could be World War I or the lengthy Iraq-Iran war. We are now seeing that Ukraine has lost the initiative. It's pushing on some directions without major gains. Its summer counteroffensive has not yielded in major combat victories. And then the Russians are now on advance with terrible losses on their side of both material and equipment. But Russians are advancing, and what's more, Russians have...
By the way, I was wrong about Avdiivka. I think it's going to take much more time. I don't know if they can... I don't know if they will be able to take it, though. I mean, they seem stuck so far. You can see it right here. I would have bet on Avdiivka being in real trouble right now. It's not really still in real trouble, honestly. So yeah, where's that Wagner when you need them? Oh wait, I know where they are.
Have a lot of money pumped into their military-industrial complex and into recruiting new soldiers. So now the material advantage is gradually on the Russian side. And without massive support for Ukraine, we might be seeing this conflict on a trajectory for Russia's victory, even if Putin doesn't achieve his maximalistic objectives in this conflict.
Let's talk about the chances of massive support for Ukraine, because last month NATO foreign ministers tried to put the best face on the situation. They promised unwavering support, as they put it, as the Ukrainians bravely defend their country. The figures tell a different story, don't they? Not quite adding up to unwavering support. An EU plan to provide Kiev with 50 billion euros in budget support, that's stuck in committee. A $60 billion...
That's gonna, I mean, they're already forcing Hungary to, they're basically forcing Hungary to remove its NATO veto. And so I think that's an unfortunate coincidence with the stuff that's happening in the US. I think that's coordinated. I also think in the US that Biden could do some compromising. It's not really all on the Republicans. The US border is a big problem, and I understand why people don't understand the full impact of the Ukrainian war and don't understand how important that is and how time critical it is. And so, I mean, the US is isolationist many times, and especially the Republicans right now. But I don't think, in principle, I don't think they're against supporting Ukraine. I could be wrong. They could be lying in what they say officially, but I mean, that's what I've heard from them. Vivek, of course, is against, but he dropped out. He's endorsing Trump now. Trump is there. Trump is not saying don't support Ukraine. Trump is saying it would have never happened if I was there. I would stop the war in 24 hours. Okay. I have a feeling that when Trump actually gets into the office and gets surrounded by at least somebody who knows what's going on, he'll be influenced a little bit, but maybe he'll do what Vivek wants to do and quit NATO. I don't know. But I'm not seeing this doom of, it's stopping. It's just bureaucracies and politics and things like that. But I'm not really seeing the lack of support, at least not with the ruling elites.
Fund promised by the White House is stuck in Congress. This is bad news, isn't it?
The bad news is that, unfortunately, the support for Ukraine in the Western public is going down. And then it also became a source for politics making for domestic purposes in the US, and also for intra-European Union conflict between Hungarian leadership and the rest of the Union inside the EU. We are talking at the moment when President Zelensky is scheduled to arrive in Washington, D.C. He's most likely to speak to the leadership of
It's a month ago, okay.
the Senate and the Congress.
This is probably, these guys are talking about probably the worst moment for Ukraine so far.
He's about to see President Biden. So I think that the amount of support of the U.S. and the timing, whether the Ukrainians get the money they need to defend themselves for next year, is up in the air. The fact that it's not kind of a guaranteed and very well-scheduled train of support is a bad news, but I think that it's too early to be desperate. But I think that the very warning side is that it's most likely will be the last massive package for the next year. And then the question is how wisely the Ukrainians are to spend it.
Later this week, EU leaders meet in Brussels with the possibility of making an historic decision to open accession talks with Ukraine. Hungary has threatened to block the move. You mentioned Hungary a moment ago. Either way, decisions there at this meeting could decide the outcome of this war, couldn't they? Arms supplies to Ukraine have already been drastically affected, haven't they?
I think that it's not deciding the outcomes of this war, but I think that if we don't have a positive decision of massive aid of support for Ukraine, then the trajectory of the conflict is going into negative direction for Kiev. And despite the bravery of Ukrainian defendants and the resilience of Ukraine as a society, without massive influx of Western material support, the situation will be pretty dire.
Hey,
The
Leroy.
Kiel Institute for the World Economy said on December the 7th, newly committed aid to Ukraine reached a new low between August and October this year, an almost 90% drop compared to the same period last year. The Kremlin must be jumping for joy, isn't it?
The Kremlin is, and we've seen President Putin gloating around that in his meeting with Russian senior military staff. He was awarding Heroes of Russia awards a couple of days ago, and he said that Ukraine doesn't have its own economy, doesn't have its own defense base, and this is why the trajectory of the conflict war is...
I knew Coffee would be a babe. Well, did you have any doubts whatsoever?
in Russia's favor. He might be wrong long-term, but he's unfortunately right now, and it's everything in the hands of Western political leadership to prove Mr. Putin wrong.
The White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said last week that any shortfall in funding would quickly compromise Ukraine's air defense capabilities. In your view, how long does Ukraine have to get the weapons it's calling for before its troops not only fail to advance, but actually begin to...
Good-looking Coffee.
Retreat?
There is a discussion inside Ukrainian senior military leadership and the political leadership, as well as among friends of Ukraine in the West, what's the best strategy Ukraine should follow right now, because Russia is heavily dug in, material advantage is on the Russian side. Whether it makes sense for Ukraine to try to break through the Russian...
Leroy has explained it to you.
...lines, given how exhausted its troops are, or the better approach for now is not to chase counter-offensives next year, but dig in, fortify defenses, be able to rotate the troops, do another round of mobilization, train more troops, and then come more prepared probably in 2025. I think that's a heavily debated issue right now. And depending on the decisions that the Kyiv military leadership and political leadership will take, we'll see how they will go about this.
Whatever happened to all those extravagant promises that Ukraine received over the last 20 months, which were fulsome and in many ways unique? Look at the way the EU morphed almost overnight into an organization that supplies military hardware.
I don't think you do a video, right, Coffee? You just do just show Photoshop or whatever. You don't do you don't have a cam, right?
Look at the change of heart in Germany, the much-publicized Zeitenwende, turning point in history that Chancellor Scholz spoke of. Was there, in your view, always a timeline attached to the West's largesse? Moscow has always believed that, hasn't it?
Moscow indeed banks on the fact that Western support for Ukraine will evaporate at some point, that Moscow has much more at stake given Mr. Putin's obsession over this war, and given how seemingly united the society is behind this war. I think that based on work done by my colleague at Carnegie Endowment, Andrei Kolesnikov, and our partner sociologist, Denis Volkov, we see that around 20% are diehard supporters for this war on the Russian side, and about 50% are very passive and will go to whatever direction there is. So on the Russian side, you have economic growth, you have increased military production, and you have focus, because this war is the organizing principle of...
I would be so careful to say economic growth. I mean, okay, I mean, call it that if you want, but it's not sustainable is what's happening. It's moving into a planned economy kind of thing, and the more the word, it's all subsidized and financed by the government.
Russia's foreign policy and domestic politics right now. The Russian hope is that the West...
How's on Bradley's? Oh, cool. The opinions changed. I think the Ukrainians really just learned how to use them really effectively, as in maneuvering, moving quickly, and that's really where the the platform excels. You can see that there's only a couple of misses in that gun attack, the Bushmaster, right? And, that's just something the Russians can't do. And I think the Ukrainians were trying to use them as, attacking from the ambush, static positions, and it didn't really allow the Bradley to show what it can do. And I think they've become ballsier right now. And, that's great.
At some point will pack and leave. And again, it's totally up to the Western leadership and to societies to help Ukraine to stand in this battle, because I think that we have some communication gaps, because
I used to stream with the web on Instagram at some point. Oh, with the webcam, I guess. Instagram at some point, I got sick of the messages and bread. That's such a girl problem.
Western leaders have explained to their societies why it's so crucial to support Ukraine, and I think that more questions are aroused. So there is a need for a new round of explanation why this conflict is so existential to Western interests.
The EU Council President Charles Michel was asked on this program about Europe's commitment to Ukraine. He said the EU would stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes to secure victory. Do you think such promises were made in good faith?
They are, but at the same time, we don't have a very clear definition of what victory is. That's also is achievable.
We know what a loss is, don't we? We certainly know what a loss is.
We definitely know what the loss is, and the loss.
We don't. I don't. Please tell me. What is a loss?
Is when Ukraine doesn't achieve any of its objectives, and the cost.
Okay. So that's the definition for this guy. When it doesn't achieve any of its objectives. What are the objectives? Freedom. I mean, Ukraine has already achieved some objectives. It's liberated the Kherson area. Kherson itself. Kharkiv area. I guess liberating DNR, LNR, rest of Kharkiv Oblast, Melitopol, Mariupol, like all of the territory. Is that? I still don't understand.
Stop this war is borne by both Russia and Ukraine, but cost on the.
It's been a while since someone slid into Augie's DM. Well, I'm married, so.
Ukrainian side will be.
My wife is in my DMs.
Much bigger. I think that right now, part of the discussion that we are having is that how realistic are the definitions for victory put out by President Zelensky, which is 1991 borders, including Crimea.
Well, and Vlad, of course. Just kidding. Vlad's actually not in my DM. Wait. Just wanted to check. Again, Vlad just ghosts, just doesn't appear at all. Okay. Didn't give me any explanation why he's not coming. I think he didn't I usually forward like memes and things to him on Telegram, and I think he hasn't read anything since January 5th, okay? So, I don't know what's going on with Vlad. I could ask him, of course, but that would spoil the mystery, so I kind of like it this way.
Crimea, reparations, so Russia should pay for the damage. And
You're logging into your bank account. This is sliding into your DMs. Okay, well, I didn't know that. Thank you.
And accountability for war criminals, including both senior Russian leadership and President Vladimir Putin. How achievable is that if we are dealing with a nuclear power is questionable. And I think that here, the Western leadership has, in a smart way, because there is no other way to tell Ukrainians what the definition of victory should be, have pushed this to Kiev leadership itself to say that,
I don't know if that's such a... I mean, it's useful to have... I think Kiev has been doing quite a good job in terms of defining the objectives, unlike Russia. Which is, hey, let's have a maximalist goal of getting Russia out of Ukraine completely and regaining everything and getting, back to 1991 borders. I don't see why that would be bad. I mean, if you have to settle for less, if you must, okay, but I don't see a problem with that. The Ukrainian objectives are much more well-defined than the Russian objectives, which are not defined. Denazify Ukraine, demilitarize Ukraine. Ukraine is more militarized now than ever it was. Prigozhin said that. He said, there are no Nazis, and Ukraine is more militarized than ever. So there you go. And then he died.
Ukrainian leadership should define what victory constitutes and will be there with them till the end. Now, I think it's the reckoning time for Ukrainian leadership itself to define how real.
Tempted to troll our friend. Oh, Skate. Oh no. I had a really nice chat with him today on the server about IT things like ASP.NET and things. We started talking about Kinjals because you can't shoot down Kinjals. You know that, right? It's like a super weapon. Can't shoot it down ever.
Realistic those goals are, and what is the strategy to achieve something which will be tangible.
The Ukrainian leadership sticks to the position that it's not going to give up any land.
Can you imagine the level of how some dudes are repulsed? Persistent, maybe? I still have those who write me constantly for several years. Oh, yeah, the guys do that.
On the contrary, it wants the land back. That
And
looks...
there's really, I mean, you don't have any good options. Like if you write them back, it's gonna get worse. And if you don't write them back, it's gonna be like the same level probably. And then they're gonna call you like all kinds of, once they give up, they're gonna call you like all kinds of horrible names and things and hate you forever. So you can't win, okay, Coffee? Just just accept it. That's what people with penises, do. Note that I'm using the word penis because this is YouTube, okay? Just write me back and all stuff. I think she means dudes are repulsive, maybe. I mean, that, both things can be true. I definitely agree with that one. I much prefer women, but that's just me.
It's increasingly unachievable, doesn't it?
I don't think that it's feasible to imagine that any Ukrainian leadership will legally abandon any territory occupied by Russia, be it Ukraine or be it other 4 regions that have been partially occupied and then annexed by Russia late next year. But there could be other ways to frame this issue and to say that war will not necessarily be over, unfortunately, even if Ukraine achieves its 1991 borders. What prevents Russia from shooting over the 1991 borders? It's not that Ukrainians...
Nah, I don't buy this argument. If Ukraine would get to 1991 borders, it would be a game changer. I'm going to use the words. It would, something, Russia would collapse in some way. I don't know. I mean, can you imagine Russia losing Crimea, Russia losing DNR, LNR? That would have to be such a catastrophic failure that, come on. Like, does he think that the Ukrainians would just stop shooting at the border? They wouldn't stop shooting at the border.
will regain territorial integrity of their countries as recognized by the international community. And then Vladimir Putin will say, oh, sorry, I'm lost. You won. I'm packing and going home or buy myself a plane ticket.
My sister worked in high-end restaurant when she was young. She used to get dudes tracking her down. Oh, my God.
Get to The Hague. So what is the realistic way?
I'm sorry to interrupt. He can't go.
One stalked me. He thought it's romantic. Okay, I blame the movies, okay? Whenever you see stalkers in movies, it's romantic. Oh, and the women love that. Women go to those movies. Women buy those tickets. Oh, it's so romantic. When it happens in real life, then, oh, it's creepy. Okay, well, maybe, just kidding. But it's kind of true.
Go home empty-handed, can he?
So many unhealthy behaviors in the movie that you see in like rom-coms and just movies. So many really bad behaviors. Oh, it's so romantic because it's happening in the movie. It's not happening to you in real life. I could name some other things that are great as a fantasy and not in real life, but I won't because this is YouTube.
Putin. No, he cannot. And we can imagine a scenario where he loses the war and stays in power, like Saddam Hussein after his debacle in Kuwait. But it's unlikely, knowing how much Vladimir Putin banks on his legacy over annexation of Crimea and other parts of Ukraine.
Mr. Gaboyev, the Kremlin appears to have stabilized after Yevgeny Prigozhin's infamous mutiny and the rather predictable plane crash that he suffered. But will there have been murmurings that Putin showed unexpected weakness under pressure? Might someone have already decided that...
I've seen the meme that's like, what's wrong with men these days? I tell them no once and they never push. Oh yeah, the women. Yeah, I think Sean had made a video about that. Like the what do they call that on is what do they call that? It's like you share things that bad things that happen to you. I don't remember how you call that. I think because I'm not on Instagram or TikTok. But yeah, those are actually real. Like, it's not even a meme. Like, women are sharing, oh no, I cheated on my boyfriend with his father, and then it turns out my boyfriend wasn't actually cheating on me, what do I do? Like, she cheated as a revenge, and then realized that actually he wasn't cheating on her, and things like that. Oh, L's, sharing, like, you know, like you have wins and losses, and it's L's.
All they need to do is give him another push, and maybe they could clear the path to someone else taking over in the Kremlin. Do you think thoughts?
Well, honestly, I have people, I have friends who work in, obviously in IT in the US, and they're terrified to hire women. Because it's really, really expensive. If you do that, you know, and then in the Me Too world, you just expose yourself to so much possible litigation, even if it's not true, that it's, you know, they openly told me that, you know, I would just consider that as a negative, basically, when selecting candidates. So there you go. Like, you know, I'm going to be mentoring her, and then she's going to report me to the, you know, to HR or whatever. And, you know, there might not be anything there, but it's going to screw everything up. The company, like everything. And that's kind of, I mean, I'm not saying Me Too is silly or crazy or not exist or anything like that. I'm just saying, I think the business world is kind of adapting to it, and the reality of it, and the leverage that you can have. And it's kind of reacting with, hey, maybe let's hire less women, or
like that are crystallizing at the moment among Russian leaders?
Missed the early 2000s. Yeah, Harvey Weinstein, I think, also misses those times. My boyfriend was surprised at first. I told him he's wonderful, and then I started showing what guys are writing to me, and he oh, that's a good way. That's a good way to do something constructive.
No, I think that these hopes are futile. I understand why people want to see somebody taking care of the world's Vladimir Putin problem, but that's unfortunately not happening. To the contrary, Prigozhin's mutiny has only fortified Mr. Putin's grip on power. He has eliminated the most dangerous rival that he also self-created and procrastinated for the problem to get bigger and bigger. But now this problem is fixed. Everybody in the elite got the message, and everybody's not rallied around Mr. Putin willingly, but they understand what price they will pay if they ultimately step up against Mr. Putin.
You yourself wrote in July how the mutiny had exposed what you called the fragility of Putin's power system. People won't have forgotten that fragility, will they? What amounts to a danger for the leader, and Putin was by all accounts in some danger, is always an opportunity for opponents, isn't it? That's just politics, isn't it?
It's fragility of the regime for sure, but time and again we see that Mr. Putin is learning some lessons, and that the system is adaptable. Remember how miserable Russia looked at the battlefield at the very beginning of this conflict, where Ukrainians, bravely being in far less advantageous position, just pushed back and smashed a lot of Russians who had material superiority. And yet, right now, we see that Russians are learning the lessons and able to turn the tide. Something similar has happened to the political system. Yes,
the most important lessons, I think, the Russians haven't learned, but they have definitely adopted. That's true. Krenki is a good example of how they didn't really learn the lessons. You still need a lot of approvals. You don't get direct coordination with the drones. It's still very, very dysfunctional. It's just that they made a lot of things, and they recruited a lot of people, but it's definitely not anywhere near the reform that the Ukrainians have done before the war started, that Zelensky did.
He has shown how fragile the system is, but Mr. Putin can fix some of these issues.
You warned last summer that far from seeking a so-called off-ramp from his war in Ukraine, Putin is preparing for an even bigger war. Do you still feel that way? And if so, how big might this war be?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're seeing now. Mr. Putin will invest 6% of GDP to defense and to war needs in Ukraine. 40% of Russian budget next year will go to defense and security. That's more than at any given moment since collapse of the Soviet Union. He is increasing the troops numbers, and his military industry is working on free ships, producing materials to defeat Ukraine. So I think that for now, the war is contained in Ukraine. If he is victorious, I don't believe that he will be able to achieve his maximalistic goal to put a friendly government in Kiev. But if he's not deterred, I would say that the risk for further challenges, hybrid challenges to the Baltic states or to some Eastern flank countries is unfortunately not entirely zero.
So when Joe Biden says if Putin takes Ukraine, he won't stop there, and then we'll have something that we don't seek and that we don't have today, American troops fighting Russian troops. Do you believe that that is a possibility, even a distant one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not likely, but there's definitely a possibility. I mean, how can... Of course. But it's just remember how misinformed he is. Just remember how these optimistic reports and what they do to the generals and to him when they do orders based on these fake reports that they're getting from the ground. They're living in their own world, and anything is possible when you're not grounded in reality, which they're not.
If anybody would say to me 2 years ago, I would say, oh, yes, you had it.
Yes.
Russia is very serious about NATO Article 5 commitment. It's definitely understanding the power symmetry between itself and NATO. So no, NATO is not at risk at all. Right now, I'm not so sure. If he is victorious in Ukraine, if he sees that Ukraine is a broken country and he can occupy the land with impunity, and there is a leader like Donald Trump who challenges the utility of NATO to American interests, the temptation to kind of challenge Article 5 will be there. I still think that the risk is low for direct confrontation between Russia and the US, but the risk is unfortunately going up rapidly.
It would be the sausage strategy. It wouldn't be direct, obviously. Russia has very rarely done direct things, unlike, well, this war excluded, but it started in a very indirect way in 2014. There would be support, there would be hybrid interventions, there would be things. There would be abusing the democracies against themselves, supporting factions, providing weapons. And then, you know, the Article 5 doesn't really kick in that scenario. Hey, well, you know, are these really Russians? You know, they don't have... You know, remember, they took Crimea without having the Russian symbols on their uniforms? Putin is like that. Like, you would think, well, it didn't matter. Well, to him it did. So that's what would happen. It would be hybrid warfare, that's hybrid intervention that would escalate slowly, and he would push and see where and if the Article 5 will actually activate. And he would count on, well, you know, Biden is going to call me and tell him, well, Trump, they're going to call me and tell him, hey, knock it off. We're going to actually start fighting, and then I'll stop and I have nothing to lose. I guess he doesn't.
But if he were to discover that Article 5 isn't worth the paper it's written on, NATO's finished, isn't it?
Yes.
That's absolutely
absolutely
true, and that might be the temptation on the Russian side. So many people were wrong about Putin's plans to invade Ukraine because, objectively speaking, if you are a rational pragmatist, the list of downsides for Russia is just so long. It has killed thousands of its people, including its most professional military.
True.
It's sanctioned. It's isolated from the world. It's becoming junior partner of China. But Mr. Putin is not deterred, and his grip on authority in Russia is strengthened. So what if his course is proven to be a winning course, at least for himself, and he can impose this vision on the Russian elites? The temptation to challenge Article 5 in NATO and chase the Americans out of Europe will be growing. Mr. Putin is not getting younger. He's not getting any rational. So the risks are not zero, unfortunately.
This might be the itch that he can't stop scratching, you mean, in other words.
Yeah, and this is exactly why getting...
He has nothing to lose. He thought this is going to be over soon. It's going to be relatively painless, maybe some sanctions, no big deal. He got stuck in Ukraine instead. Then he annexed the territories because he thought that was ballsy, I guess. And now he doesn't have a way out, really. I mean, he painted himself into a corner. And he really has nothing to lose. His economy has switched to China, and, you know, it's not going to go away. Like, even if they lift the sanctions tomorrow, I don't think there would be a large reversal immediately. So, yeah.
Serious about defense and getting serious about citing and all the promises that were made 2 years ago when Russia invaded Ukraine, I think are really very necessary to fulfill, not only to support Ukraine, but for Europe's own security. Containment is the way to go forward, unfortunately.
Let's look, if we may, at Putin's friendship with China. You wrote last spring that thanks to the war in Ukraine, Russia and China are now closer allies than at any time in the two countries' modern history. Do you believe that Putin's new best friend, Xi Jinping, would go along with the idea of a bigger war?
I think that Mr. Xi Jinping couldn't care less where the conflict where the border or the contact line between Russia and Ukraine is, as long as this war doesn't go nuclear and he is not blamed to support that. He respects American red lines, which have been communicated to him. No kinetic military direct support, no military material, and by and large, he follows that line. If Russia is weakened, isolated, and more aligned and subordinate to China, what's the bad news for him? He only likes this situation.
What about Putin's other foreign friends? Suddenly he's popping up in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, where he was greeted as a very dear guest of the kingdom. In Moscow, he's been putting out the red carpet for foreign leaders like the president of Iran. So much for the international isolation that was expected to follow his indictment for war crimes charges. Is he just flaunting his impunity, or is he busy putting together a new anti-Western axis?
I guess both. I mean, he's trying to, but it's not really working. And Saudi Arabia, maybe we didn't join BRICS. We don't know.
3 quick points. I think that the illusion about the global unity in isolating Russia, it's just illusion and it's a fantasy. It's very easy to cast abstention or a vote criticizing Russia in the UN General Assembly. But so many countries in the global south, not only China, but also the largest democracy in the world, India, are having a beneficial commercial relationship with Russia, and they're not abandoning Vladimir Putin. Same goes for countries in the Gulf, including UAE and Saudi Arabia. Receiving Putin with this symbols of prestige and welcome is also a way to show to the West that this region has friends, and this is tied to the Western handling of Gaza crisis and war between Israel and Hamas. And then finally, yes, Mr. Putin is trying to put this coalition together, what he's
emphasized trying to
call the global majority. I don't think that anybody in the global south is really believing Mr. Putin when he said that his brutal war against Ukraine is a rebellion against U.S. hegemony. But so many countries are following that narrow, pragmatic interest and blaming the West on double standards. They say, what about Iraq? What about Afghanistan? And frankly, there is not that much introspection that will convince these countries that Russia's war against Ukraine is entirely different level of violation of international norms.
It is because of the annexation. I think that analogy would actually mostly work if it weren't for the annexation. And of course, the incompetence of Russia, because Russia was able to achieve what the US has done in days in Iraq, right? So, yeah, there's no... If Putin did a better job, I think it would be very different. Like, it would be incredibly different. Very, very different. Because... and Israel is showing this really well. I think the world, especially the West, we can pretend we're civilized and so on, but I think people generally support people who are at least strongly fighting back, if not winning, preferably winning. So, Ukraine would not get this level of support if it just rolled over and died and didn't resist. No way. It would be completely different. People would protest, of course, blah, blah, blah. And maybe you would provide some javelins to the Ukrainian guerrillas in Ukraine, and then it would be, a protracted conflict like Afghanistan or whatever. It would be a completely different situation. People would be saying, well, it's done. What's done is done. There's nothing we can do. We're not going to fight Russia. Russia, it was inevitable. Let's focus on, trying to defend against future Russian expansions, blah, blah, blah. And that's what would happen. It wouldn't be anything like this. The only reason that Ukraine is getting this support is because Ukraine was fighting for 3 whole months with only Soviet weapons and javelins. Like the only... like javelins and like some small arms And yeah, the rest was just Soviet. So there's no way that if they didn't do that, if they didn't stand up, they didn't actually beat Russia during those 3 months, like really hurt Russia, that you would yeah, that's the only reason why you got support. There's nothing else. The harder you hit back at Russia, the more support you're gonna have. The more you talk about peace, the more you talk about negotiations, the more you look like a weak side, you're gonna get less and less support. That's just true. Israel knows this really well.
To what extent, I mean, you talked a bit about the Russian economy. To what extent have improvements in that economy helped to keep the Russian people, if not on side, then at least not protesting? The people who protested, hundreds of thousands of them have gone, haven't they? They've left the country.
Yeah.
But somehow they seem to have realigned or coalesced around the Kremlin, haven't they? Is that the economy?
We have the estimate of roughly 500,000 people leaving Russia for good, me included. For a country of more than 140 million, that's not too much. And these are people who are employable in global markets. There are so many people who want to leave Russia but couldn't because of visa restrictions and many other policies. For the remaining people, it's a mix of violence because protesting has a very tough price. You see Alexei Navalny, you see so many thousands of brave Russians who have dared to protest this war and have been beaten and imprisoned and so on. The Russian society is atomized, and Mr. Putin is building his regime on this level of atomization and lack of unity.
True.
But then another element to this is really the economic prosperity, because the war has made a lot of low middle income families really receiving a lot of money because the government is paying people to go to the front lines. It's giving hefty cash outs for families wounded and killed. So it is a rational strategy for somebody to go to fight in Ukraine because his families will be provided.
Of course.
You mentioned briefly the Gaza war. It obviously diverts US weapons and ammunition from Ukraine to Israel, and it also leaves America increasingly isolated diplomatically. So it's a clear benefit to Putin, isn't it? There's no downside for him in this war.
It's a clear benefit to Mr. Putin that he hasn't created. There is no credible evidence that he was in any way involved in Hamas attack, but he's definitely taken a one-sided, increasingly one-sided pro-Hamas stance. He is not executing the even balanced Russian foreign policy, not that much sympathy for the victims of horrible October 7 attacks. And yeah,
that was a little surprising to me, but
the U.S. resources are diverted to Israel. Attention of U.S. senior policymakers, including President Biden himself and his national security team, is diverted to the Middle East. And then the double standards of the West are something that Mr. Putin has preached to the global South, and he has fertile ground there.
So very briefly, does that mean Moscow is ending the year on something of a high, looking better than it did a year ago?
If you look back, 2023 has been a really surprisingly good year for Mr. Putin. And it's really in the hands of the Western policymaker to make sure that 2024 is not as good for him.
No.
Alexander Gabuev, it's been good to have you on Conflict Zone. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, guys, I think I'll be wrapping up too. And I'll see. I think I'm gonna stream on Sunday for sure, but maybe next week I'm gonna try producing some videos to try and get our channel from the black hole that it's in. So we'll see. Of course, thank you for watching, and catch you next time.